Good afternoon, boys and girls. Yesterday, I said that you would need this page for social studies today. I'm going to switch it up because how many things can go not quite the way that I planned this week? We are taking a running record. So, you're not going to need this page for today, but what I would like you to get is your notebook, and we're going to make our own paper. Alright, so we are going to make our own chart today. We need to divide our page into 3 sections, and I'm just going to kind of ballpark about 2 or 3 lines above the dot, and maybe I didn't ballpark quite enough for the third one. It's not quite in thirds. Mine's not equal, but that's okay. So yesterday we watched a video that talked about rural and urban areas. Today we are going to list out the characteristics of rural, urban, and suburban areas. So those 3 are going to be, let me see if I can make this a little bit clearer, our headings. Let's first, I'm going to put rural at the bottom because it is, it kind of has the smallest. We're going to start with urban. Okay, so in urban, or when we think of urban and when we're using urban to describe a place, we are usually describing a city. So an urban area is a city. In the city, we have lots of people. I will let you know that today is going to be mostly writing. Feel free to pause the video if you need to. People get around the city by using taxis, buses, and trains. There's other ways, obviously, but these are some. Cities usually have more apartments and less houses, so that way more people can live in a smaller area. There is usually little nature, maybe a few trees, a few plants, but not very much nature. There is usually a lot of buildings, lots of buildings. I'm going to bullet point these real quick. Okay? A lot of buildings. And there are lots of jobs and businesses. Lots of people living there, lots of people needing work, right? Lots of jobs and businesses. Okay, so when we think of an urban area, we think of a big, busy place, big, tall buildings. In Michigan, when I think of an urban place, I think of Ann Arbor, I think of Lansing, I think of Detroit, parts of Detroit. I think of Kalamazoo, possibly, is Grand Rapids the one I'm thinking of? I think Grand Rapids. There's lots of big cities, in Michigan that I am not super familiar with the names of them, to be completely honest. But a big name one that we have been talking about is Chicago and New York City. Those are both urban areas as well. Now, in a place that's like a city but kind of smaller is called a suburban area, and that is going to be our second category. Suburban area. Okay, so in a suburban area, that's like a smaller town, like Jackson, like, I'm trying to think, smaller town, Jackson, Addison, Adrian, there's lots of small towns in Michigan, but I don't know them. They are usually close to the city. Close to city. or close to bigger area. So, and this would be like Brooklyn is to Jackson, okay? However, Brooklyn is smaller than a suburban area. There's some traffic and some people. Some traffic and people. There's some nature, so more nature than in an urban area. Nature. There are some jobs and businesses. There are some buildings. And to get around, we use cars, walk, or bike. Okay, so these are our notes for suburban area, smaller than urban, a lot of the same things, just on a smaller scale or less of them. Then, if you need a pause for either one of these categories, go ahead and do that before I move my document camera. Then we're going to look at the rural area. Okay? Rural area is where I am most comfortable at, just because it's less crowded, it's less people, it's less claustrophobic for me. Some people classify the rural area as the country. Many people would say that Brooklyn or Napoleon is a rural area. It is the country. There is few people, not many people. They're spread out. There are few buildings and they are small. So our buildings are much smaller, a few small buildings, than in a suburban area or a urban area for sure. There are few jobs and businesses because there's less people. There's less need for jobs and businesses. If you go to the UP, where were we? This is true for the UP too. But when we were also driving through on our way to Montana in like South Dakota, North Dakota, we went literally hours without seeing much civilization. There was lots of farm area and there were houses, but there were no gas stations, no party stores, no grocery stores. And we asked ourselves, like, where do these people get their groceries and their food from? But also, how often do they go? Because it was a long ways away before we saw an area. And even when we went up to the UP of Michigan, that's true. There's lots of forests and trees up there, and there's houses up there for sure. But the places that you go to get your food, your groceries, your gas, those are quite far away. So you kind of have to plan and be prepared for that. Speaking of trees, there's lots of nature in rural areas, whether it's trees, nature, or farmland, some way or another. In rural areas, there is a lot of nature. To get around, you really have to use a car because everything is too far to walk. And then there's not really trains that will take you from one place to another and stay in that place. Like I said, there might be a train like in Jackson. You can hop on the train there, but where you go to is not going to be in Jackson. So you can get on the train there, but you're not going to go to another place in Jackson. And then going along with nature, there are lots of farms and barns. Okay. So these are some characteristics of a rural area. a suburban area, and an urban area. I gave you a chance to pause on the top two, so I'm going to leave it up here so you can see the rural characteristics. I do want you to remember these. Take a look at them, maybe make flashcards so you can say, oh, this is part of this area, this is part of this area. You could practice mixing and sorting them too. And then this will be something that we pick up next week. We're not going to do social studies tomorrow. So we will continue talking about communities next week.